1,000 members in total across most of the UK sectors, and contrary to perhaps what you might think, a range of different sizes of business. We do that through direct corporate members, but also through a network of about 140 trade associations. So as you can see through their memberships, we actually represent mostly small and medium businesses. What we do like to think in a slightly grand way, though, is that when the CBI speaks out on an issue affecting the business community, we are doing that with the weight of the British business community behind us. And certainly for our members at the moment, there is no bigger issue facing us than the EU referendum. But I thought I'd do sort of three things to try and address the question. Just tell you a little bit about the CBI's approach, how we've approached this issue of sort of economic reform and the UK's relationship with the EU more generally. Set out what we see are the benefits and what we think are the main things that need reforming, and then just address that exam question at the end, the prospects for reform. When the Prime Minister put the in-out question of the referendum on the table in his Bloomberg speech that you mentioned in your introduction, Maurice, in January 2013, the CBI undertook what's the biggest piece of work we've done for a very long time. Certainly my Director General, John Cridland, who's been at the organisation for 35 years, says it's the biggest piece of work he can remember. We had a team from McKinsey working with us on the economic data. We consulted our regional councils and trade association council, our internal governance structure, held sort of events for CEOs. We even went to talk to our members out in Washington and Delhi and Shanghai just to get an international perspective. And the outcome of that piece of work was a report that we published in November 2013 called Our Global Future, which we hope is a pretty comprehensive study of the business case of how to secure the UK's future prosperity. I think it's important to say that we have never claimed that the business community is monolithic, that it is completely uniform in its view on the relationship with the EU. But there was a clear majority amongst our members, at least, in favour of the report's two key conclusions. The first of those was that while there are some costs to EU membership, and there's a membership fee, it's a net cost to the UK, there are some regulations that CBI members don't like, some don't like the pooling of sovereignty that's necessary to join an economic bloc. So while there are those costs, our members felt that the benefits of membership significantly outweigh those costs as is now. And in fact, in a survey we conducted of our membership as part of our research, 8 out of 10 said they would vote to remain in the European Union. And interestingly, 77% of our smaller members said exactly that, so there wasn't really a difference between small and large. Second big conclusion of the report was that our members were absolutely clear that the EU was not perfect. In fact, they told us in great length and great detail quite how imperfect they thought the EU was, despite thinking that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. And were very, very clear that the EU could do a lot more to boost jobs and growth. It's worth me saying that our members, though, did want a reform agenda for the whole of Europe, not a special deal carved out for the UK. It's in the UK's national interest for our European partners, the other member states of Europe, to be successful. After all, British businesses want wealthy consumers in their biggest market, which of course in export terms is the European Union. So in a nutshell, you could describe the CBI position as in with reform. Very clearly in, but equally sure that the EU must continue to change. So our members identified a number of key benefits of the EU membership. And as I said, in some ways our analysis of what reforms we want to see sort of flows from those memberships. It's more of what Europe does well, less of what our members think the EU does badly. And very quickly, I'm sure none of this will be a surprise to you, but the biggest benefit for our members was the single market, 500 million customers, 7 times as many customers in a home market as you would get just in the UK. Our members also like, and this might be a bit more counterintuitive, the common rules. You often hear business organisations complaining about regulation, and that is often the case with specific pieces of legislation, but underneath that there's a recognition by the business community that one set of rules instead of 28 is a net positive, particularly if you're a smaller business looking to export for the first time. The size of that single market, that 500 million block, helps attract foreign direct investment. Our multinational members, Japanese or American car companies, many of them invest in the UK knowing that they've got access to that wider market. The EU also helps our members access the skills they need to grow. Our members recognise there's a sensitive debate going on about immigration, but for the British business community, free movement is a net positive. It allows our members to plug skill shortages and have pan-European management chains. Our members were very, very clear that access to labour across the European continent, to more talent, helps ultimately create jobs and help businesses grow here in the UK. And then lastly, the benefits that our members identified included trade deals. Not only trade within the EU, but the EU is also a launch pad to trade further afield, whether that's South Korea as one of the more recent ones, Mexico, South Africa, and so on. But as I said before, our members don't think that the EU is perfect, and in that process, while identifying those benefits, identified 4 big areas where they'd like to see the EU change to do more to support businesses grow. Put simply, our members want a more open EU. Excuse me. More open EU. The single market generally works well for goods, but there are still a lot of barriers that exist in the single market for services. The 2006 directive has been very unevenly implemented across Europe. And also, our members felt the single market needed to be updated for the 21st century in terms of digital commerce. So in those areas, our reform agenda was very much for more Europe, a more extensive open single market. Our members also wanted, though, an outward-looking EU. So one of the things actually where the EU has come in for quite a lot of criticism has been quite slow-moving on signing trade deals. Obviously, the EU, as a big market, is more powerful in signing those deals, but you do need to get 28 countries aligned on one side of the negotiating table before you even sit down with anybody else. So putting more resources and pursuing those trade deals with greater speed was a big priority. Also wanted to see a more competitive EU. It's no myth that smaller businesses do sometimes suffer from burdensome regulation, coming from the UK as well as from the EU, but definitely some of it coming from the EU. We're looking to see a better process for formulating regulations with a sort of think small test. If a regulation works for small businesses, it'll almost certainly work for larger businesses as well. And then lastly, we want to see a better balance between the EU and its member states, and this means 2 things. One of critical importance is the balance between the Eurozone members, the ins and the outs, particularly those countries like the UK, which have a permanent opt-out. And secondly, it also means the right balance between the EU institutions at the centre and the member states. We do think sometimes the rules of proportionality and subsidiarity are sort of heeded more in the breach than the observance. So that was the reform agenda. But look, turning very quickly then to what we think the chances are for British business of getting progress on some of those reforms. The media often portrays the debate in the UK as the UK being the only country that wants some of these things, sort of battling against all the other 27 member states who are perfectly content with the status quo. But the status quo across Europe is, not great economically at the moment. 20% unemployment in many places, 50% youth unemployment in Spain is an absolute, tragedy. And obviously there is sluggish growth in many places across the continent. So over the last sort of 18 months or so since we published the report, CBI has visited 10 of our sister federations around Europe to just see what appetite there is for reform. And it's worth me saying that the relationship between CBI and its sister federations normally mirrors the relationship between the UK government and other member states. So put very crudely, there is a north-south divide. The CBI normally sees sort of more eye to eye with some of the Nordics, the Dutch, and perhaps less so with our equivalent organisations in France, Italy, and Spain. But actually what we found on our travels was a very positive surprise. The imperative for growth, some of those unemployment figures that I've mentioned, seem to have opened up a window of opportunity whereby people who we wouldn't normally expect to share our view on flexible labour markets and structural reform are willing to contemplate those. Just a couple of examples as colour. I mean, in Italy, business pushing really hard for the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Their recovery is export-led. Clearly, signing a huge trade deal with the US would be a boost. Similarly, the Spanish we found very supportive of the proposals for a digital single market, seeing opportunities to keep Europe ahead of global competition. And our French counterparts are particularly strong, actually, on the need to reduce regulation. They recognise too much regulation is a burden on entrepreneurial activity. And actually, you can see across this sort of range of reforms that the CBI has called for, quite a bit of progress actually already being made. A lot of it's actually going under the radar, a lot of it's unreported in the way that the UK-EU debate is framed. Vice President Timmermans has had an initiative, reducing the number of initiatives the Commission is undertaking, this new Commission under Jean-Claude Juncker, to 23. When the second Barroso Commission took over in 2010, there were 300 initiatives on the table. So really focusing down on the issues that really matter at a time of economic difficulty. We've seen the Capital Markets Union package from our own Commissioner, Lord Hill, Digital Single Market package, and even things like the recent ECJ ruling on euro clearing. Not the sexiest of topics, but actually critically important to the CBI's financial service members in London. That was a real victory for the primacy of the single market of 28, as opposed to the smaller sort of inner eurozone. So, getting reforms for the CBI, we think it's possible. There's a reasonable prospect of it. Good in themselves for boosting prosperity, but also we think those reforms will then play back into the UK debate, helping organisations like the CBI set out our case that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Andy.